Ministers Yong, Lang, Chief Executive Chun, distinguished guests, it is a pleasure to offer remarks on the occasion of Singapore's International Energy Week. We are meeting today to discuss energy needs just as the COVID-19 pandemic still affects both the developed and developing world, and as economies are gradually starting to reopen. There's a global economic recovery underway, but the pace of recovery is uncertain. In April this year, we projected that the developing East Asia and Pacific region, excluding China, would grow by 4.4% this year, and we now expect growth to be only around 2.5%. This is partly due to the evolution of the pandemic, but also due to shortages of key inputs and energy price increases. We also see that recovery is uneven across the world. Per capita incomes may increase by nearly 5% in developed economies, but only 0.5% in low-income economies. There are two key implications of this context on energy markets. The first is that reliable and affordable energy supply is going to be key to a strong economic and social recovery. And developing countries, including many in this region, face growing energy demand. Second, while countries adjust to short-term economic impacts that are driving up energy prices right now, they continue to face the longer-term collective action imperative of reducing the carbon footprint of their energy consumption. In about 1 week, many world leaders will be discussing climate change at the COP26 in Glasgow in the UK. The World Bank Group is the largest provider of climate finance to developing countries, much of it embedded in cleaner forms of energy and transport, more resilient infrastructure, climate-smart agriculture in cities, and we are aligning all bank finance projects with the objectives of the Paris Agreement by middle 2023 and working with governments on their plans to green entire economies. Our country climate and development reports, which analyze ways to advance development goals, but to do so in a manner consistent with countries' climate commitments, will identify practical ways to do so, including by meeting each country's energy needs. We believe that growing energy needs need to be met using gradually cleaner sources of energy. In this context, the transition away from reliance on coal for electricity production to cleaner energy sources will be a critical component of climate action by both developing and developed countries. Coal is responsible for 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions and presently accounts for 40% of power generated globally and 60% of electricity consumed in the East Asian Pacific region. Reducing the world's reliance on coal will require an unprecedented increase in investments in clean energy, as well as the grid infrastructure to integrate these new sources to ensure reliable supply for economic activity and for households. At the global level, this will require a 4 to 5-fold increase from current levels of new renewable solar and wind capacity additions every year for the next few decades. We estimate that meeting the NDC targets or commitments of China, Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam will require investments of $8 trillion for the power sector alone between 2020 and 2040. A more aggressive scenario, aligned with the Paris Agreement, could increase the required investments to $10 trillion. Encouraging this transition through relative price and regulatory reforms will be needed so that economies can both grow and develop, but also avoid building stranded assets and contribute to further global warming. It will also entail some costs which many developing countries may be unable to afford. These costs would have been borne by consumers, taxpayers, and international assistance must also contribute. So identifying the price, fiscal policy, regulatory changes needed, and mobilizing the trillions of dollars of financing required to ensure that energy transition takes place, but also that energy services remain affordable to developing countries, is the critical task ahead. Our conversations with the private sector indicate that they expect significant complementary public sector policy action, and a predictable regulatory environment to de-risk and bring in this increased private capital. Concessional financing will also be required to bridge the viability gap. So this is a critical conversation that we are having today at a very critical time. I hope that this Singapore Energy Week will be an opportunity for a productive exchange to support the clean energy transition, and we at the World Bank look forward to continuing our very strong partnership with you. Thank you.